Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey Wells, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how to find, keep, develop great employees. Today, I'm going to be talking to Todd Davis, who's the Chief People Officer of FranklinCovey, with over 30 years experience in human resources, talent development, and executive recruiting. He's also the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, Get Better, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships at Work. Todd, congratulations on the new book and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, great. Congratulations on the Wall Street Journal rise into the charts. So congratulations.
Yeah, we were pretty excited about that. I don't know that that's because anybody knew who Todd Davis was, but this topic of relationships at work certainly is resonating around the world.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I want to start off by talking the role of the Chief People Officer has changed over time. It's gotten more complex, not only to have to worry about, recruiting amazing people and talent, but also having to really think about the company culture and how to retain employees. And at FranklinCovey, you guys tout the company's greatest asset is your people. Tell me a little bit about how to really build the company culture around that, to really identify the people and really from the top down, how to make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, as you said, FranklinCovey, we don't just believe, we know that culture is in fact your ultimate competitive advantage because, your competitors and everybody else out there, they can duplicate almost everything else you have, your strategy, your operations. But the one thing that's pretty tricky to duplicate is your culture. And so we place much emphasis on that. I view the Chief People Officer role as more or less, not to use a sports analogy, but more or less the quarterback of the culture.
Yeah.
While we all contribute in great companies, we know that everybody contributes to the company's culture. You've got to have somebody or some buddies who are really responsible every day. That's what they wake up thinking, eating, sleeping, breathing. And that's my view, at least, of the Chief People Officer, that she or he is ultimately responsible for quarterbacking the culture of the company. To begin with, as you ask the question, how do you create this great culture from the top down? I don't know that it ever finally reaches its end point. It's an ongoing effort, and I think it certainly starts with the mission of the company, the vision, the values. But what I've seen in many organizations, or some organizations, is that those are well crafted and posted on the wall, and that's where they sit. And so I would say that our success and the clients we work with, successes come from making sure those are metaphorically lifted off the wall every day, and that they're modeled by everyone in the company, but certainly by the leaders. Somebody asked me the other day in an interview, so does creating a great culture have to come from the top down? Well, it's certainly more effective and happens quicker when it comes from the top down. But I like to remind all of us that we can all, within our own teams, within our own parts of the organization, we can work to model, and it creates what we call a circle of influence, where we start to spread that culture. But certainly, if you've got your CEO and your executive team modeling the very values that you espouse and post on the wall every day, talking about them, bringing them up in every town hall and in every email, then you're certainly spreading and creating the culture much faster.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to go back on, you mentioned quarterbacking, which I love the concept, being a college football buff over here. But we have so many different generations now in the workforce, and with the rise of millennials, and then, having even Gen Z starting to get in the workforce, it's, has given us a lot of great, amazing perspectives on a lot of things in the workplace, but also causes, different conflicts on people and beliefs and work-life balance and things of that nature. And when we look at that, it can create some headaches for HR on those conflicts and how to appeal to different cultures and demographics within the workplace. And in your book, you wrote 15 proven practices, and how I'd love to go over all of them today. But can you give us maybe the top 3 that you think are the most relevant on really trying to blend these generations in the workforce, and some tips from that standpoint?
Well, shoot, I only get 3.
I know, right? You can get the rest of them in your other questions.
Okay, great. Well, no, it is something to certainly be aware of. We are raised at different times in the world. We're raised with different values and different ways of thinking, different ways of getting work done. So absolutely, to your question, there are generational differences, but I at least, and I'm in the older generation, but I at least have found that we absolutely have much more in common than we do, different in those opinions. And what I like to remind people, and what I do in the book, is that the end in mind is the same. If we can figure out what it is we're trying to achieve, then our ways of getting there, our ways of establishing that as a team or organization, work much more cohesively together if we can continually remind ourselves, wait a minute, we have the same end in mind here. So specific to your question, as I look at the 15 practices, and it pains me to only talk about 3, but I'll do that.
I know.
Practice number 1 comes to mind. It's practice number 1 for a reason. It's called Wear Glasses That Work. And what I would ask the listeners here to ask themselves, are you seeing things as they really are, or are you seeing things as you've convinced yourselves they are? And so everybody else should see things the same way you see them. Practice number 1 is all about stepping out of our long-held beliefs and paradigms, and they may be very wise and based on lots of experience, and they may be accurate, but those excellent leaders frequently re-examine the paradigms they're holding just to make sure that they're not seeing, a person or a situation in the wrong light. They might be unintentionally stereotyping a group of Gen Xers or millennials, saying, "Oh, well, they're lazy," or they, I just find it's very dangerous to have an opinion held so long without examining it and saying, "Wait a minute, they have a different way of getting the work done, but they're actually more hardworking than some of these other people." So wearing glasses at work is key. That's practice number 1. As I look through these, maybe I'd go to practice number 7 next. Practice number 7 is titled "Think We, Not Me." Practice number 7 is all about having an abundance mentality. And what I have found in my over 30 years of experience in my chief people officer role or roles very similar is that those leaders who continually have this abundant mindset, how do we all win together, versus, well, I got to take care of myself first, and then I may or may not think about you later. Now, nobody says that out loud, but because we're human beings and we're survivalists, we sometimes fall into that trap of thinking, well, I got to take care of me first. But this abundant mindset versus a scarcity mindset of thinking we, not me, is profound in creating a phenomenal culture in your organizations and in really being that kind of leader that we all want to follow. Let's see, I get a third one here. Lots of great practices. I would say practice number 10, talk less, listen more.
Love that one.
Yeah, ask yourself this question. I'm talking to your listeners now, and not you, Carrie. I'm sure you're a great listener, but do you listen with the intent to really understand the other person? Or like most of us, and I certainly catch myself in this situation, are you listening with the intent to reply? Where somebody else is talking, they're passionate about something, and we're nodding, and we're making eye contact, and kind of listening, but almost pretending to listen because we're already formulating our response in our own minds. And I found it doesn't come from a bad place. As people, we are fixers. We want to help. And so someone's sharing with us, and we're thinking, oh, I know how to fix that, or I know what I do, or this happened to me. And so we're starting to formulate that response. But I'll tell you, as Stephen Covey said, the best-selling author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he said, the deepest need of the human heart is to feel understood. And boy, I have seen time and time again that statement being so true. yes, there'll be a time for us to offer our advice or to give a suggestion. But when emotions are high, people first and foremost need to feel understood. So practice 10 is to talk less and listen more.
I think you were at my dinner table last night. I think I'm just going to play this portion to not only the HR folks, but my son as I repeat that day in and day out.
Yeah, especially with kids or teenagers, that rule, I've struggled with that concept. But boy, when I forced myself to think, no, wait a minute, Todd, just take time to understand her. Just take time to listen to him. Boy, you get a lot farther, a lot faster.
Yeah, I think your PR folks need to spin this book as a parent guide, because I can relate back to the first tip you gave too. And I'm just like, I'm casting youth generation of not listening, being lazy, and I'm doing it with my kids, not just employees. So, when you spin this book to be a parent guide, I want you to re-listen to this podcast and throw me back a little credit here.
Take note of that.
Well, awesome. One of the things that you said, the we, not me, and the end in mind, I think is very critical. And one of the things I loved when we first chatted was that you don't call your HR department, an HR department or HR business partners. You call it people services. And I really love that, of kind of tearing down the walls of HR as its own little group, and we're just filling jobs or, kind of mandating policy. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and how, that's helped HR work more closely with some of your departments internally.
Well, thank you for asking that. When I've been with FranklinCovey for over 23 years now. It'll be 23 years in July, actually. But when I was first asked to take on the Chief People Officer role about 16 years ago, I was quite honestly not excited to do that. I didn't have, I had a lot of experience in sales and marketing and actually recruiting, but not from an HR perspective. I was in the medical industry for a long time and recruited positions. But in my view, growing up, HR, and I'll be a little bit confessing here, HR were the policy wonks. They were the police of the organization. They kept the rules, but they weren't really tied to the organization's outcomes or to their vision. They were kind of this necessary role that every organization had to have. So I wasn't, when I was first asked if I would consider taking on this role, I wasn't that excited about falling into that. And then while we didn't have the concept yet or the practice, wearing glasses at work, I thought, well, wait a minute. If I take on this role and the team that I'm going to lead, I'd like to shift, if in fact our organization at that time had the same view that I did, I'd like to shift that view. And while words don't shift a paradigm, it's the way you start things, by calling things by their right name. And so we came up with the concept of, yes, we have to have the follow the labor laws and all of the legal requirements of any organization, public or private.
Boring
but
stuff.
I like our team and the organization to know that when we walk through the door every day, we are here to partner with the organization in the business. And so that's how the term people services came about, is to remind me and to remind our directors of benefits and our directors of recruitment, the recruitment department, everybody else that walks through the door and walks into our team area. We are, in fact, people services. We are here to serve the clients, and our clients are all of the just under 1,000 associates at FranklinCovey. And so it came about from that mindset, wanting to shift that mindset if people were coming with an older paradigm of what, quote unquote, HR really is.
So you mentioned that, you came into this role and you had more of a sales and marketing background, and you had been hiring and recruiting as probably, an executive or a hiring manager perspective from that standpoint. It seems like every day when I'm talking to HR executives, the role of HR has come into a lot of marketing, and recruiting has become a lot of marketing. And it seems like I'm going to go back to I think it's rule number 1 about non-stereotyping, but it seems like the most successful corporations and chief people officers or CHROs have some type of sales or marketing or non-HR background that have taken principles and kind of real life examples and experiences and made it not just about HR versus somebody that has been a career HR person that hasn't been in a sales or marketing role. What are your thoughts? I mean, are you seeing that or, across different organizations, or do you think that has any bearing on some of the marketing and kind of culture practices from that standpoint?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I was quite flattered when our CEO and president came to me, like I said, 16 years ago, and said, "We'd like you to consider moving to the role of chief people officer." And I was taken aback and thought, "Well, folks, I don't have this HR background. I'm not dismissing that at all. That's very important. But to your point, Carrie, they said almost exactly what you just said. They said, "Todd, you've been here for," at that time it was almost 10 years. "You've been here for 10 years in various roles of marketing and sales. I led in what we call our innovations department, where we create some of the FranklinCovey's world-class solutions. I had the great benefit of being, a leader of some of those big projects." And they said, "We're thinking, who better than someone who has been in our company in all different parts of the organization to help us create the culture that we want everybody to have here, because you've actually experienced firsthand at a deep level some of these different departments." And again, I say that with all humility, but I was quite flattered and thought, wow, that's a pretty forward-thinking way to go about it. And so while I don't think that is the only path or has to be that way to have a great, phenomenal culture, it certainly has or is working out for FranklinCovey and some of the other organizations we've worked with. It's not saying to dismiss those that come up through a traditional, HR, through the traditional HR ranks, but it is saying choose those people and find those teams that really are determined to contribute to the success of the organization and not just be, in their little box of making sure that we have benefits and policies and compensation correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more of I'm not going to call it a trend, but I'm seeing it more and more of, really looking kind of outside of the typical box. And, chief people officers can surround themselves with people that their core job is to know the HR policy and to know the guidelines and things like that. It doesn't mean the chief people officer has to be ingrained in that. So I think we're seeing it more and more from that perspective and finding it quite successful. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about recruiting for a second. The role of recruiting has changed significantly in this digital era and reaching candidates in more of a digital fashion. And every company's hiring process, recruiting process is a little bit different, but same principles of, you're going to be using, some type of job board or some way to get candidates. And then there's, a phone or a video interview and, hiring manager reviews and all that kind of stuff. You guys have switched from your initial phone screens to now video. Tell me a little bit about what you've seen in the initial kind of phone screens versus moving that to video. And, is it getting you more ingrained with the candidates and developing better experiences? Is it, reduced your time? Tell me a little bit about how that's working for you guys.
You bet. So it's the goal in recruiting, and I was in recruiting for many years in the medical industry. We have a phenomenal recruitment team here at FranklinCovey. Our director of recruitment has 4 full-time recruiters. We are hiring a lot, but we're not just obviously focused on volume. We're trying to make sure we get the right people. We are proud of a pretty low turnover at FranklinCovey, and it's because we take a lot of time to make sure that we're what the candidate wants and that the candidate is what we want. And so we do have numerous interviews for every what we call client partners. Those are our account executives, and that's probably the most frequent role we hire. To your point, so our goal is to cast the net wide and then to sift through and filter through these candidates as quickly but as effectively as possible. And so we moved to a video type interview after the initial phone screenings, which our recruiters do so well. Then they send out this link for this system, and the candidates will answer a series of questions on video. Now, I was talking with someone the other day, and they were saying, yeah, that doesn't work for us at all. And I was quite surprised until I saw the type of questions they were asking. What our goal is in these videos is to really have a conversation, so to speak, with the candidate. So we're not trying to trip them up. We're not asking trick questions. It's more of a tell us about yourself type interview on the video. And the candidate, we have some questions that really put the candidate at ease. Then she or he answers these questions. It's maybe a 15-minute video. They answer a series of 5 or 6 questions. There's no right or wrong answer. They're more behavioral based. Tell us about a time when you had a situation like this, or what do you prefer to do more in this type of a sales role? So we have 15 minutes of a conversation. And I'll tell you, Carrie, the effectiveness of having the recruiters then go through those. And if they've got, let's say 30 of those for one position, they pick out the 5 that they say, boy, from without flying this candidate in, without taking tons of time, these are the 5 that really rise to the top. And then they're able to just shoot those around to the 2 or 3 hiring managers that are in the process of hiring this particular person. We all get to look at those and say, boy, of these 5, these are the 3 I'd like us to bring in. So it just expedites the process very quickly. Now, some might say, well, gosh, if someone doesn't do well on that in that type of setting, maybe you've missed someone. Yeah, we probably have. But we have found now, we've done this for several years now, it has really accelerated our getting to the real gems. I mean, we're finding some phenomenal people in their areas or their industries. And so it's really made it very efficient and very effective.
Well, great. So the last question I have for you is the $100,000 question here. As a chief people officer, there's a lot of things that keep folks up at night. What is keeping you up at night? What is making you say, I really have to solve this. I really have to, think more about this. This is really concerning for me. What's keeping you up at night?
That's a loaded question.
Besides family, kids, blah, blah.
Well, no, but I'm thinking in the spirit of our people services group, besides, our director of people services, she and I talk regularly, and we often joke about, the great thing about people services or human resources is you never know what the next day is going to bring because people are interesting. But putting the employee relations type things aside, and I don't deal with most of those other than the very significant ones. Putting those aside, in the position of chief people officer, and as I said earlier, the quarterback for the culture, I would think, I don't know if they keep me up at night, but that weigh heavy on my mind. One would be, are people in my organization, at FranklinCovey, in our organization, are people bringing their best selves to work every day? Are they engaged? Are they feeling, whether they have stock in our company or not, do they feel like and have that pride to come to work as owners of the company? Whether they're the receptionist at as you walk in and meet him or her at the door, or whether they're one of the line leaders or on the executive team, are they bringing their best selves to work every day? And that all has to do with engagement. How engaged are they? And while I can't be responsible for every one of them, I can certainly be focused on, is their role fulfilling? What could we do to make their role more fulfilling? Are we really tapping into their best talent? So that's a constant thought that is going through my mind, and things that I'm focused on. Kind of leads to the second one, if you're asking me to come up with 2.
Sure.
And that is, what experience or training do our leaders need? What the leaders value gets valued. And so the quickest way to improve or change the culture in the organization, as we said earlier, is through the leadership. And so I've been thinking, especially lately, about some of our leaders who are all great people, but many of them have been put into their leadership roles because they were great individual contributors. And as a recent statistic I saw mentions that most leaders are put into their first leadership role at around the age of 30, and yet they don't receive, and this is quite shocking, they don't receive any formal leadership training until age 42 or thereabouts. So you got this whole company or whole team or group full of leaders who are good people and who have good intuition and can kind of try and figure things out on their own. But shame on all of us, in our organization and others, for putting these people out on the field, so to speak, and not even teaching them formally, what their role is and how they do certain things. So those are the two things. Are they bringing their best selves to work every day, and what can I do and what can we do to help improve that? And what training, where are the gaps in the current leaders we have in the training that they need to be successful as leaders?
Yeah, those are great points. Well, Todd, this has been awesome. You've given us so many amazing practices and principles. Go grab Todd's book, click on the link in the show notes, check it out. Wall Street Journal bestseller. Sounds like an amazing read. I can't wait to read the rest of it. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate the opportunity.
This concludes today's podcast. If you have any questions for Todd, feel free to submit them. Always share and spread the love. Thanks for joining.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.